Hello, welcome back. In the last few lectures, we've been making leaps both stylistically and scope of the work that's been discussed. We're going to continue that today. In this module, we're going to talk about new theatrical forms, going to talk about poetry and heightened language or poetic language, its form and its function, as we discuss a very interesting and very different play from what we've been discussing so far, The Day of the Swallows by Estela Portillo. Women, Chicanas and Mexicanas, we know, have been historically underrepresented in the early Chicano theater movement. We've talked about that previously. Now, though, we've read several plays that have had stronger and stronger women's roles. In particular, the two plays that we discussed by El Teatro de la Esperanza, Guadalupe, and La Víctima. In both of those plays, women took on a much larger role, not only as characters within the plays, but also as actors and artists, participants in teatro, behind the scenes, writing the plays, creating the plays, and then stepping forward into inhabiting major roles that they had written. Stronger roles, more three-dimensional roles, roles that were not only more integral, but that were part of the driving force behind these plays, both Guadalupe and La Víctima. And what were the forms of these two plays? Well, in Guadalupe, it was docudrama, taking material that was historical, based on a United States Civil Rights Commission report, doing their research and writing this documentary-based play, docudrama. And in La Víctima, it was Brechtian, episodic, epic theater, a series of scenes that led up to a story with a broad historical range that, like Brechtian plays, interrupted the forward momentum of the emotional aspects of the play with songs, with historical quotes, with political dialogue that made the audience stop and think about what was being presented. Today, we're going to go a little further. While both of those two plays dealt with different aspects of institutional racism and oppression and identity, it also dealt with a broader view of Chicanas, writing and performing and portraying realistic characters on stage. Then in the very last lecture, we dealt with two plays that were a little broader in global politics. Vietnam Campesino, talking about farm workers in this country being drafted, going to Vietnam and realizing that the peasants in Vietnam, the farm workers in Vietnam, the campesinos, were not very different from the farm workers in the U.S. Then the second play we dealt with in our last lecture, Manolo, dealt also from a global view to a barrio view, looking at the after effects, the aftermath of the war in Vietnam. A Chicano veteran, a Chicano veterano, returning to barrio, returning with PTSD, returning with a drug addiction, and how he tried to deal with his life there and what happens. So the plays are becoming still very political in nature, but they're becoming a little broader in scope. The politics are becoming a little more subtle, still political, but a little more subtle. And also in Manolo, the view is wider, even though it's about the barrio, and all of the characters in Manolo are Chicano barrio characters, both the antagonist and the protagonist, big roles, small roles, all the roles are Chicanos. Which brings us to today. We've gone from something different, from Guadalupe and La Víctima, to something different, Vietnam Campesino and Manolo, to something very different today. The Day of the Swallows by Estela Portillo. This is a big big step. But let's ask ourselves, when was Day of the Swallows written? It was written in 1971, but haven't we already studied Guadalupe, which was written in 1974, and then we studied La Víctima, which were also written by women or with women as a large part of the writing pool. That La Víctima was written in 1976. So why are we now going back chronologically to 1971, to this play written by one woman with one woman's artistic view, Estela Portillo and the Day of the Swallows? Why are we going back chronologically? For this reason. As we've been studying Chicano theater in the early days, there has been a growth from the actos to the mitos to elements of magical realism in the mitos to the women's roles in making plays that were docudrama and had bigger women's roles to Vietnam Campesino and Chicanos in Vietnam, a more global vision of Chicanos and politics, to then what the effects of the Vietnam War was on the Chicanos in the barrio. Now something entirely different. A play by a woman, about women, with all the central characters being women. Yes, there are a few male characters in Day of the Swallow, but it's primarily about women. So we're studying this now instead of earlier because the stylistic change is so different. And not only that, but this play, written in 1971, had a lot of trouble being produced. It was not produced until after productions of Guadalupe, until after productions of La Víctima. And why is that? The subject matter? What is the subject matter? A queer woman. A queer woman, a queer Chicana, written in 1970, 71, being portrayed, or not being portrayed, perhaps because of the subject matter? This is a very interesting play on a lot of levels. So in 1970-71, when Estela Portillo wrote this play, she had something in common both with Ruben Sierra, who wrote Manolo, with the women who wrote or were part of the writers of Guadalupe and La Víctima, in that they were all college educated. So they had a little more sense of theater, were a little more adept at writing. But Estela was not, she started to do theater, but she had an MFA in English. She was an English teacher when she started writing plays. One of the first plays that she wrote was The Day of the Swallows, written in 1970. Ahead of its time, perhaps? I would say yes. Why is it ahead of its time? Because maybe the Chicano theater that was written in the 1970s, from 1965, when El Teatro Campesino, Luis Valdez began with Las Dos Caras, El Patroncito, all the way through their growth into mitos, etc. It was mostly, yes, as we've seen and talked about earlier, from a male gaze. Most of the major characters were men. Most of the politics were about working in the fields and then about urban areas in Vietnam. So the women characters were a little more secondary, and certainly not even in terms of male characters yet had there been plays produced that had gay characters. Nowadays, most people would refer to them perhaps as queer characters. You can use the term you prefer. But here was a play written in 1971 that centered a queer Chicana and her struggle, her issue, her denial, of her identity? I would suggest that was probably why this play has been done very rarely. Still, now it's done once in a while. I wouldn't even say more often. I'd say more often, but not a lot. But it's done a little bit more because now, after the plays by Sherry Moriega and other queer feminista Chicanas, there are more plays written and produced by queer Chicanas and about the queer Chicana experience. But at this time, in 1971, not done much. So, Estela Portillo, English major, educated, but she called herself, if you read also in the required materials, which I hope you did, the interview with her, she refers to herself over and over as a Chicana. So a lot of people, I would venture to suggest, from her background, from her doing her work, someone with an MFA in English, teaching first in high school and then in colleges. In those days, the 70s, not a lot of them, they might consider themselves feminist, but not a lot of women referred to themselves as Chicanas, but she did. So that's a political statement. However, there's another political statement she makes or doesn't make in this play and that she dwells on in the interview, which is this. And it's a contentious issue. She states in the interview that she wrote this play for it to be entered in a contest for a prize. She wrote it, as she says, she needed money. She wrote it for the money. Nothing wrong with that, nothing wrong with artists getting paid. However, she states then later in the interview that she was trying to write a play that would be successful, that people would be interested in. So she wanted subject material that would be a little more interesting. So she decided to write a play about a gay woman. But then she states in the interview that she's not a gay woman. Nowadays, that would perhaps be an issue to be discussed. Who has the right to tell those stories? That's a discussion we can have. Unfortunately, we can have it this way. Perhaps we can have it in one of your online discussion groups. That's a good discussion to have. Perhaps we can have it in one of our open sessions where you and I will be able to meet and talk in person if you're interested. But it would be a contentious issue, I think, nowadays for someone to say out loud, no, I'm not a gay woman, but I wrote a play about a gay woman. Particularly if she says, and I wrote it because I thought people would read it because of that and it would help me win a prize. That might be contentious. However, and this is also perhaps going to be a little controversial. This is just my opinion. If you read between the lines of her interview, and if you read a little bit of her biographical material, and if you look at this play, I wonder. It's a play about denying or hiding your identity. I wonder. I wonder why she felt she had to make that statement, I'm not gay, in that interview. Just something for you to think about. Now let's get back to the play. How is this play, The Day of the Swallows, different from some of the other plays that we've read so far? Well, one, it is a very realistic play. In fact, I would say you could even venture to call it a well-made play. We've talked about, of all the plays that we've read so far, probably, this could be a point of discussion, you might disagree with me, while I would say there are some very realistic sections in Guadalupe, there are some realistic sections and scenes in La Víctima. There are other elements that would lead you to say, no, the characters are a little broad, the characters are a little archetypal, it's not exact, and then it's Brechtian, so it breaks out of that. It's not totally a realistic play. And in Manolo, we did say, is a realistic play with realistic given circumstances and realistic characters, even though some of the characters, even in Manolo, are a little broad. The character of Chano, the Robin Hood, I don't know how you feel about making a cat burglar be a positive character, but he's kind of the storyteller who provides all the expositional material. But he's a little broad, and certainly the two henchmen of El Louis, Tank, and the other henchmen, they're rather broad. So while you can say that Manolo is an attempt, perhaps, an attempt at a realistic play in a realistic setting, and it's an attempt at a play to be a little more of a well-made play with a beginning, a middle, and an ending, even though the play is very political, talking about Vietnam, drug addiction, police, I wouldn't say police brutality, but the way police are viewed in the barrio. It is, I would say, a realistic play. So how is this play different? Again, just to reiterate, we know that Manolo, whether you think it's a well-made play or not, was an attempt at a well-made play with realistic characters and realistic circumstances. How is this play, The Day of the Swallows by Estela Portillo, different? Well, we know this was a Chicana because she refers to herself that way. In the interview, which I hope you read because it was required, she refers to herself as a Chicana several times. She was a Chicana with an MFA in English. Didn't study theater. She wrote about theater later, but she was an MFA in English, who then later on went on and earned a PhD, taught in high school English, taught in colleges English, taught in universities, theater and English. But she was an English major in college with an MFA. So she wrote a very realistic, well-made play. It has a beginning. It has a middle. The beginning sets in action the circumstances of the play. The middle advances the plot, inciting incidents, introduction of characters, and the end in kind of a Aristotelian ending, poetics, Aristotle's Poetics, goes to a logical conclusion. Logical not that we like what happens at the end, but logical in terms of the story as it was written and when it was written, to a logical ending. This play also has big, explicit settings. So it was very much in the style or vein, not of an acto, not of a mito, not of docudrama like Guadalupe, not Brechtian episodic like La Víctima, not even big global politics like Vietnam Campesino, or urban barrio like in a realistic setting, attempt at like Manolo. This is a well-made play with a beginning, a middle, and an end, big set described, but it also opens something new, a new door to be used in Chicano theater, which is the reason why, even though it was written 5 years before La Víctima, 3 years before Guadalupe, why it was not produced yet. It was something very different in Chicano theater. The language was very poetic. Poetry, heightened language, Not heightened in the sense of iambic pentameter, blank verse Shakespearean, just heightened language in the beauty of the lyricism of the language. Even the stage directions are lyrical. In fact, let's listen to a little bit of the very beginning of the play, the stage directions. The Day of the Swallows by Estela Portillo. Stage directions. The tierra of Lagos de San Lorenzo is within memory of mountains sweet pine. Then the maguey thickens with the ferocity of chaotic existence. Here the desert yawns. Here it drinks the sun in madness. The village of Lagos de San Lorenzo is a stepchild. It is a stepchild to the Esquinas Hacienda, for the Hacienda has been a frugal mother and a demanding father. Its name comes from the yearly ritual of the Saint Day of San Lorenzo, when all the young women gather around the lake to wash their hair and bathe in promise of a future husband. The tempo of life, unbroken, conditioned, flavors its heartbeat with dreams and myths. The hacienda is a fiber upon which existence hangs. The church, the fluid rose, assures a future promise of Elysian fields. No one dares ask for life. And it goes on for another full page. These are just the stage directions. But you can feel the lyricism in the stage directions. It was hard for me to read them and not get a little, perhaps over dramatic. If I did, my apologies. But it's hard not to want to lean into the poetry. It feels so good on the ear. Feels so good saying it out loud. Because don't forget, plays are not meant to be read. For this class, they're read. But if you haven't yet, I really suggest once in a while, read some of the play out loud, a page or two, or 3 or 4 pages, or get a friend and read with you, read some of the dialogue out loud, because plays are meant to be savored and meant to be experienced and embodied. Anyway, so we know now that this well-made play with a beginning, a middle, and an ending with beautiful heightened language, not only are the stage directions heightened and beautiful and poetic, but some of the characters, Josefa, when she stands at the window and feels the sun on her, speaks lyrically, poetically about the light. When she describes the swallows, when she describes the lake, it's very poetic and beautiful. So the language is very beautiful. There are all these different classes in the play. There's Josefa and Alicea, women of a particular slightly higher than working class, not upper class. They're working women. We'll talk about how they work in a few moments, but there's working women. There is the milk woman who brings in the milk, Clemencia. There is a drunk uncle, Tío Tomás. There is Don Esquinas, the owner of the hacienda. So we have, and then we have Eduardo, the indigenous mixed race. We might call him mestizo, as we know that that's a very important part of Mexican culture. Mexican culture runs the gamut of mestizaje from very light-skinned, some Mexicanos, Mexicans, to mixed mestizo Mexicans, to very indigenous Mexicans. But I think most scholars would say, certainly Octavio Paz and others, that what defines Mexico is a mestizaje, is a mixture of the races, indigenous race and others, conquerors, conquistadores, Europeans, etc. So there's all these classes defined that are present in this play. We never hear how they don't describe themselves, neither are they described. It doesn't say Eduardo, an Indio, enters. But they're all either Mexicano, Mexican, or Latino. You can refer to them as Latinx if you like, or mixed, racially mixed is how Eduardo is described. It doesn't say mestizo, right? It says mixed identity. Clara is blonde, light-skinned, but it's implied that she's probably upper class Mexicana, but light-skinned, because there's a lot of those. So there's a mixture of all the different aspects of Mexican, Mexicano, Mexican-American characters in this play. So they're all there, and not all of them speak poetically, but certainly Josefa does the majority of the time. And certainly once in a while, Alicea speaks poetically. And the circumstances, what happens, the use of light, the symbolism, which we'll talk about later, the symbolism are all very poetic. And then what's the one other big distinction about this play? Perhaps why the play was not produced for so long. Why we're talking about it now, because they weren't talking about it much in 1970 or 71, except for the people who read it, and we'll talk about that in a moment. What also makes this play different? Because Estela Portillo wrote a play that centers women. Yes, we had the plays of El Teatro de la Esperanza, Guadalupe and La Víctima centering women, and yes, the women in El Teatro de la Esperanza were some of the writers who wrote these great roles that then they later portrayed, inhabited, embodied. So they were part of the creation of these roles and then played the roles. But Estela centered women, and in particular this one woman, Josefa, who we find out later was, I guess you would say nowadays, a queer woman, perhaps, a gay woman, perhaps, sexuality ambiguous, I would say not very ambiguous, but it's a woman who is different. And perhaps we'll go more into depth about that in a moment. Bear with me. This is a very beautiful and complex play. Is it somewhat dated? Sure. Are most of the plays that we've discussed somewhat dated, some others, some less? Perhaps. But for when this was written, this play was way ahead of its time, which I believe is why it was not performed much when it was written and why it still to this day has not been performed very much. Anyway, so it centers women and possibly a queer woman. That's why this play is so different, along with the lyricism and the fact that it's a well-made play because it was written by a Chicana with an MFA in English, not in theater, in English, in literature, who then later went on to get her PhD, so she knew how to write. So we know that this play deals with certain issues. Can we call them certain themes? Let's talk about this a little bit. And in talking about the themes, and then later on we'll talk about the theme and the motif, and then we'll talk about the theme, the motif, and the symbols. That'll enable us to go a little bit deeper into the plot and the characters of the play, which you have read, haven't you? So we talked about themes previously. What is a theme? We can say that a theme is an idea that is proposed, discussed, even if obliquely underneath in terms of theater or in a novel, in a work of art. We can also say that a theme can be the underpinning or foundation on which a play is based. In terms of Stanislavski, for those of you who want to talk about Stanislavski, you can call it the spine of a play. I like to think of the theme as a universal idea. You can call it a universal truth that is explored in a play or in literature. I also like to think of themes as a question. I like to frame themes as a question, which helps me examine it a little bit more. And the last thing I'll say about theme is, for me, a theme, because it has a bit of a universal quality to it, a theme also encompasses its opposite. For example, in Romeo and Juliet. Why am I going to mention Romeo and Juliet now? Because I would dare say, at hazard a guess, I would propose that almost everybody listening to this lecture knows something about Romeo and Juliet. If you've never read the play, you've never seen a production, you haven't seen any of the movie or movie adaptations of it, you still know about Romeo and Juliet. You still know the basic plot of Romeo and Juliet. Boy meets girl. Boy gets girl. They get married. Boy loses girl because he dies. And then girl dies because she kills herself when she sees that Romeo's killed himself. So very simple plot, but everybody knows that story of Romeo and Juliet. A universal truth. What might be the theme of Romeo and Juliet? Love. Can love conquer all? Conquer what? In Romeo and Juliet, the conflict, the violence between the two families. Can the love between Romeo and Juliet conquer the violence between the two families or not? So the opposite is no, it can't in this play because they both die, which then leaves you with the beautiful epilogue that the prince says about Romeo and Juliet. However, just that theme, love, can love conquer all or not? So what might be the themes? We'll start with one or two. What might be the theme or a theme from The Day of the Swallows? We kind of alluded to this already. And it's also a theme that's very important and close to me because it's also part of the subtitle of this course, which is Arts, Activism, and, yes, the Search for Identity. So I think in this play, The Day of the Swallows by Estela Portillo, one of the strongest themes is the theme of identity. Self-identity, hidden identity. Who is hiding part of their identity? We know that Tio Tomas is a drunk. He doesn't hide that. Other characters, I'll mention more about them as we go further in. Other characters don't really deny they might have problems with their identity. I drink too much maybe, but they don't deny that. But one character, as we go deeper in the play, we get an inkling and then learn more about her identity. And we realize that a big part of the conflict in this play is about her hidden identity, her self-identity. And what happens with the conflict of her hidden identity when she has to, I don't know if I would say she has to confront her identity, but she is forced to realize that other people might find out about her identity. And who does that? Who threatens her? This is so complicated. All the themes here overlap. So let's hold that. Who threatens her identity? Another theme in this play, the power of a woman. In the other plays that we've dealt with, even in La Víctima, even in Guadalupe, they had strong roles for women, written by strong, educated women who also went to university, UC Santa Barbara. But the women while they were strong women, powerful women, they didn't have I'll just say it, they didn't quite have the power and demonstrated the power and made a point of demonstrating the power of Josefa in this play. You can even look at her name. Why did the playwright name her Josefa? Josefa. Why not Josefina? Even though Josefa can be a short diminutive. Latinos love diminutive, usually the affectionate diminutive. Usually she'd be called Josefinita. But why Josefa? Because it's closer to the masculine name of Jose. That's my proposition anyway. You can agree or disagree with me. That's okay. But she's a strong woman. Even the first time we see her dealing with her drunk of an uncle, Tomas, who comes there wanting something. What does he want? Money. What does he want the money for? To buy more alcohol. And he's always looking around, sneaking around. He's a bit rude to her, or maybe just outright rude to her. We don't know why, but he seems to be rude to her. But does she put up with it? No. Does she put up with men in this play? Does she let men push her around? Quite the opposite. In this play, Josefa pushes the men out of this house, her beautiful artistic house, because it's described that way in the play, in the stage, beautiful lyrical stage direction. It describes how beautiful this house is, how feminine this house is, how there's lace everywhere. We'll talk more about that later, the symbology of the lace. It's this beautiful house, which is a reflection of her. It's a beautiful feminine house. Who lives in the house? Josefa and the woman, the younger woman that she rescued, Alicea. What did she rescue Alicea from? Read the play if you haven't yet. If you have read the play, then you know what I'm talking about. What did she rescue her from? Literally rescue her from. And proved her strength in how she rescued her from her circumstances. The uncle mentions that, what she did, how she rescued her. So she rescues her, and now these two women live in this beautiful home, just women living there, even so much that the milkman who delivers milk to them, the second person that we see in the play before Josefa and Tio Tomas is Clemencia, the milkwoman. So all the characters we see at the beginning, the house, the play is defined by women. So Josefa is a strong woman. So that's another theme, the power of a woman. But then, as I said, for me, a theme has its opposite, the lack of power of a woman or the loss of power of a woman. The question is, how does Josefa lose her power? Because she's threatened by someone with her own identity. Now, as you know, in Chicano theater, a lot of the plays were about identity, self-identity, about the identity of a campesino, of a farm worker. And part of their identity was how they worked and how they needed to have better working conditions. The identity of the students who were denied equal access to a good education in No Saco Nada de la Escuela. The identity of Bernabé in the Mito. So identity has a lot to do with Chicano theater. And in this play, it's a lot about identity, but about another form of identity that's different, again, which is why perhaps it was not seen and produced for quite a while. So this identity, and then her power is threatened because of her identity. Very interesting. Nowadays, if we saw this play nowadays, perhaps if it was written, the ending might be different. I'm not going to talk about the ending because you'll have read it. And if you haven't, it's a great play. You should read it. It might be dated, but it's still a very interesting, very important play in how it deals with Chicanas, with Latina women in the 70s, early 70s, 1970, 71. So another one is love theme, love and its denial. Love and its opposite. So those are some of the themes. So we talk about the loss of power. How does that power happen? Well, we learn that the uncle knows or thinks he knows something about Josefa, and he threatens her with that. What does he think he knows? Let's examine that by talking a little bit about motif. So we know themes: identity, self-identity, hidden identity, the power of a woman, lack of power of a woman, love and its denial. So if those are the themes, what are some of the motifs? And there's others, but those will get you started. Maybe you can think of other themes that you want to explore in this play, and you can write your paper on that. Motifs. What did we say previously is a motif? A motif is a recurring structure that can help underline the theme. Recurring structure is important. It means for me, it has to happen for me at least. It can happen a lot. For me, it has to happen magic three little bears, 3 little pigs, the Holy Trinity. It has to happen 3 times at least for me to think it's a motif. What is a motif? A recurring structure that supports the story. So we could say a motif in Romeo and Juliet, since we've talked about that earlier, is death and murder. We know already it talks about at the beginning about all the violence and deaths that have happened previous to the play. And then in the play, there's the death of Mercutio, which leads by Tybalt, which leads to the death of Tybalt by Romeo, which leads to the death of Romeo and Juliet. So there's a motif because it's a recurring structure. Musically, a recurring structure. In Beethoven's Fifth, dun 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 dun, dun 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 dun, dun 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 dun. So a recurring doesn't mean the structure cannot change a lot or a little, but it's a recurring structure. Does that make sense? I hope it does. So what are some of the recurring structures in Day of the Swallows? Well, let's look at the name. Swallows. You could even say day, because this all happens in one day, but it talks about other days, because this is a day of San Lorenzo. So you could say days, but let's go to swallows. Swallows. Recurs. How many times does it recur? Well, we know that's the name of the play. We know that the swallows are going to return. We know that they've built a tree house for the swallows. We know that we see the swallow with a broken wing, that Josefa tends to. Small swallow. She helps to bind its wings. She and Alicea, they work together with delicacy. Put the swallow back in the birdhouse. We also know that they keep talking about the swallow returning. The swallow's coming back today. The swallows are starting to return. So that it happens over and over. What might swallows, why are they repeated in this play? Why have this motif? What does this have to do with perhaps self-identity or hidden identity or love? Well, we can talk about the symbology, the symbolism of a swallow. What is a symbol? A symbol is something that stands for more than just the thing itself. So it's a thing that also is an idea for other things. So a symbol is something that stands for more than just the thing itself. In the play, The Seagull by Anton Chekhov, in the play, the seagull, another bird, is a symbol of flight, which means a symbol of freedom, as in Nina wanting to leave her home and soar as an actress. It's a symbol of freedom. It's also a symbol of the lake because the seagulls live around the lake. It's also a symbol of death because Constantine kills the seagull and presents it to, in a weird kind of sad, sick way, he presents it to Nina. This is a symbol of my love, a dead bird, a dead seagull. But it's a symbol of death as well as of freedom. And then at the very end of the play, for those of you who know the play, we hear Nina coming back destitute and saying, I'm a seagull, I'm a seagull, I'm a seagull. meaning she wanted to fly. It's also a symbol of death. And then at the very end, we see the stuffed seagull that years previously Constantine had killed. So, symbol. The symbol can stand for death. It can stand for freedom. It can stand for Nina. It can stand for Constantine. So, what might a swallow symbolize? Well, we also know that swallows are birds that return to the same habitat often or yearly. For those of you who know much about Southern California, there's a city just south of UCLA, just south of Los Angeles, called San Juan Capistrano, and there's a beautiful old Spanish mission built by indigenous labor that the swallows return to yearly. For those of you who might live in a rural area, it might have a barn or an outbuilding. There's a barn where I grew up. The swallows return after winter. They return to the barn. So and in the play itself, the swallows return to the lake because the swallows return about the time of the feast day of San Lorenzo. So the swallows symbolize San Lorenzo. The swallows symbolize the day that they're going to go make the procession to the lake. We'll talk about that in a moment. So it's a recurring motif, and it symbolizes a return. They're small, delicate, like Alicea. They're faithful, and they're beautiful. So those are some of the things a swallow might stand for. Swallows return on this day of San Lorenzo. What does that, why San Lorenzo? Why is that day important? It's about the lake. Do they talk about the lake? We hear about the lake in the stage directions at the top. They talk several times about the event that's going to happen at the lake. Josefa goes to the window and she looks out. The sunlight hits her. She talks about the light, and then she looks out at the lake. So, what is the symbolism of the lake? It's a recurring structure. Well, a lake, obviously, it stands for water, of course. And what does water stand for? Can we say that water is life-giving? So can we say that the lake perhaps might symbolize life? Don't forget that we've also said that for me, a theme also contains its opposite. So can we say that the symbol of the lake can be a symbol of life? Could it also be a symbol of death? If you've read the play, you can answer that. Does the end of the play perhaps have anything to do with the symbolism for life or its opposite? What else does the lake stand for, symbolize? Because it's mentioned so much, because it's a motif and it's related to the themes of love and its denial. It stands for, what do the women go and do there every year? They go there and they wash their hair and they bathe. Why do they bathe? They're purifying themselves. Why are they purifying themselves? Yep. To be ready for marriage. So the lake is also a symbol for purity. We can perhaps extend that to virginity. It also is the opposite, which is marriage, which is not always necessarily, but normally marriage also includes the loss of virginity. So can we say that the lake stands for life, and perhaps its opposite? Can we say that the lake stands for cleansing and virginity, and perhaps its opposite? So we can say that the lake symbolizes all that, as well as it symbolizes the women who go to it. What else do we know about the lake and this pilgrimage that's made every year by the young virgins to literally bathe themselves in the lake to symbolize their purity and then be ready for marriage? Well, we know that someone refused to go to the lake and take that ritual bath when it was her year. And who is that? If you read the play, you know it was Josefa. Josefa refused to go to the lake, refused to wash her hair, bathe, to prepare herself for marriage. Why did she choose to not go to the lake? First of all, we know she has a little bit of a position of power, even though this happened when she was young. Who knows if it was 15, 16, 17, but I would hazard a guess that probably in that rural area, no later than 18, it was probably earlier. Why did she refuse to do that? Can we suppose that it was because she refused to get married? And if she refused to get married, can we perhaps hazard a guess as to why she refused to get married? Can we talk about her being a strong woman who does not want roughness in her house, her beautiful feminine house, does not want men to tell her what to do, who has a very loving relationship? We don't know yet anything more than that she cares for Alicea and there's a loving relationship. But she refused to do what the women in her village did before they married. And we know in this play, at this point in time, she's still not married. So you, for yourself, can decide what that says about her identity. And then there's Alicea, who we know was saved from what might have been her identity, but did not become her identity because she was saved by that fate, from that fate by Josefa. We know that Alicea, for some reason, is feeling uncomfortable to the point of jangling nerves and is cleaning something up that we find out later what she's cleaning up. She's cleaning something off the carpet. We know that Alicea is waiting for someone to come. Who is she waiting? Who's the person she's waiting to come for her? It's Eduardo, the mestizo indigenous character who's going to take her out for a walk up into the mountains where he lives. So we know he lives in the mountains. We know he doesn't live in the city, in the barrio. He lives in the mountains, perhaps in a village. So we know that he's even closer to his indigenismo, I would say, to his indigenous roots. So they take walks up there, and he's coming to take her for a walk. And we know that, we don't know why yet, but we know that Josefa is not particularly happy about the fact that they go on these walks and that she's coming for him, but she doesn't say anything. And then Alicea goes to prepare the tea. Or is it coffee? I forget right now. I think it's coffee. She goes to prepare the coffee. Or is it tea? That's a really good. I think it's a tea. Why am I thinking tea? Only because the two women. It's coffee or tea. Sorry, I don't remember quite at the moment, as many times as I read this book. But Alicea goes to prepare so that there's something for Josefa and Eduardo when he comes. And Eduardo shows up. And when he shows up at first, a man, for lack of a better word, perhaps intruding on Josefa in her beautiful room that's normally inhabited only by women. Josefa is almost, or maybe downright, openly hostile, openly rude to Eduardo. Then she catches herself and says, "Oh, forgive me, I don't know why. I have to remember my hospitality. Please, let's have something, a coffee and a bit of a snack." So she comes to, and the conversation changes a little bit. Does it perhaps change a little bit because she realizes that Alicea is going to come back soon with the coffee, and she doesn't want to be seen by Alicea arguing or being rude to Eduardo? For whatever reason, that happens. They both meet and they talk a little more, and then Alicea and Eduardo go off on their walk. So there is that symbol of the water, the woman, her purity, and the woman taking a walk with a man that Josefa does not like. Other symbols, other motifs, lace. What do we know about lace? We know that lace is delicate. We know that lace is intricate. Can we say that intricate perhaps also means deep, profound, multi-leveled? It's very intricate and it's delicate. We know that that's what Josefa and Alicea helps her do for a living. So Josefa is a self-sufficient woman because she makes very beautiful, intricate lace that she ships off to the bigger city and that she uses on dresses that she makes that they sell, including to another character we'll talk about in a moment. So lace, it's a motif. It happens several times. It's everywhere in the house. It's on the cuffs and the collar that she's wearing. It's on the dress that she has made that she's going to bring out in a moment for the next character, Clara, that we're going to introduce. But what else do we know about lace is that it's intricate, takes a lot of time, but it's also very delicate. Can be easily ripped by unruly hands. So then Clara enters. Clara is a light-skinned blonde woman married to the owner of the hacienda, Don Esquinas. So we know she's from the upper class, but she buys clothes and lace from Josefa. She comes here, and in the course of this conversation where she admires how beautiful the material that Josefa has made for her is, we find out that she's very unhappy. We find out that she drinks too much. Not a little too much, a lot too much. We find out she drinks so much that later on in the play, it's not really, some of the instances in the play are obvious, but others, because it's a well-made play, are slowly revealed to the audience so that it gets deeper as it progresses. We know that we learn later on from her husband, Don Esquinas, who shows up in the house after Clara leaves, that she is to the point of alcohol abuse that her husband says she has to go for an extended stay to a sanitarium. So she drinks. Why does she drink? Why is she unhappy? In the course of her conversation with Josefa, she talks about how unhappy she is because of her feelings for another person, not her husband, who she is still in love with. I think it's way beyond infatuation. I think she is deeply in love with this person who we learn she's married. She had an affair with this person, and this person, can we say, abandoned her? We don't know how, if it was like a mean abandonment, but we know that this person abandoned her and that Clara drinks too much because she can't get over this. We also know that Clara looks in the mirror and says, oh my God, I'm getting old. So there is that as well. And then we find out, who is it that Clara is still in love with? It's Eduardo. Eduardo, who is out walking with Alicea, who, as we learn before they leave, that Alicea tells Eduardo, I want to leave with you now. I don't want to wait anymore. She has this beautiful house, this beautiful, feminine, gorgeous house where she's grateful that she was saved by Josefa, but now she wants to leave this house. Something has happened. And you might think you know what happens, but if you haven't read the play yet, you might be surprised as to what happened that she wants to leave. Maybe not. But we know that Alicea wants to leave. She says, take me now, let's go. And Eduardo says, don't you want to get married first? She says, we can do that later. Let's just go. So what happened that made Alicea want to leave this beautiful home where she came, a place of refuge, a place of rest, a place where she could be safe, a safe place? I don't know. yet. But we know that, is this perhaps why Josefa does not like Eduardo, what we call it, courting Alicea, going on walks? She knows, Josefa knows that Alicea is falling for Eduardo. Is that another reason why? What do we know about Eduardo? He seems like a nice person, doesn't he? When you first meet him in the conversation, he's not the first person to be rude. It's Josefa that's rude to him. And while Eduardo responds to her, he tries to stay polite. So he's never openly hostile and rude like Tío, Uncle Tomas is. But we know that she does not like him, that Josefa does not like Tomas. Now we found out perhaps one of the other reasons why. Not only is Eduardo courting Alicea and is she falling in love with him, and perhaps Josefa's getting an inkling that they might run off together, but we know now that he seduced somehow. Or maybe we can, even if we say that Clara, because she's an upper class woman, and this is a mixed race mestizo, part indigenous Mexicano who lives up in a rural area in the mountains. So even if she seduced him, we still know they had an affair and then he dumped her because she still loves him. So that's another reason why Josefa says, get these men out of here. So there's all these things that are happening, all these motifs and all these symbols. So what might be, we have the motif of alcohol. The uncle is always looking for money to buy alcohol. Clara drinks too much alcohol. Josefa brings her alcohol. The husband, Don Esquinas, when he comes in, says, my wife drinks too much and you help her drink. So there's alcohol is a motif. I'm not sure if I would say it's a theme. Could be, but it's a motif. And what does alcohol symbolize? Well, it symbolizes drunkenness. The uncle is just, it's about money. But what else might it symbolize? Why does Clara drink? It's an old trope. She drinks to forget, perhaps. So alcohol is also about forgetting the past, as well as about money. What else is alcohol? It's about, in a certain way, freedom, because it takes money to buy alcohol. That's why the uncle's looking for it. And it's also freedom from the things that are weighing you down. So there's alcohol, another motif. There's a lot of motif. There's a motif of lace. What can lace symbolize? Lace symbolizes women, even more specifically. Lace symbolizes femininity. Lace symbolizes delicacy. It also symbolizes economic freedom for Josefa and Alicea. So all of these symbolisms that are there. What are some other symbols? The tree house that's right outside the window where they put the bird. What does this tree house symbolize? What is this whole house? It's a safe place. The tree house is a safe space for the returning swallows. The swallow with the broken wing, what does that perhaps refer to? A woman who is injured. Is Clara injured? Was Alicea almost injured? So there's all these different things. So we have the lake, water cleansing, virginity and its loss, alcohol, forgetting, danger, money, lace, intricate, beautiful, easy to destroy, financial independence, the treehouse, safe space, a beautiful home, a refuge. These are all symbols. So how do these symbols help the play? Clara leads us to find out that Eduardo was her lover, and now he's abandoned her, and he's taken Alicea. We know that the lake, the symbol of the lake, gives us more information. We start to learn that Josefa did not go to the lake, did not bathe, because she did not want to get married, let's just say that. She did not perhaps she did not perhaps want to give up her virginity to a man. We could suppose. We certainly know she did not want to get married. And then in terms of religion, in terms of community, in terms of communal values, back in the day, in a small town, in a small Latino, Mexican, Hispanic, whatever term you want to use, town, community values. We still have that issue. So how do these community values, which we still struggle with and deal with today, different values, even some related to this play, but how do the community values somehow have to bear on this play? Well, you know in the play, because you've read it, that Josefa is very well respected in this community. I would say she's an elder. We don't know how old she is. We do know that Clara looks in the mirror and feels she's getting old. Perhaps that's why she thinks Eduardo left her for the younger woman, Alicea, very common trope. Josefa does not seem to mention or worry too much about her age. She might worry about other things. But we know that she's respected by the village. The father talks about how the people in the village respect her and look up to her. Even Tomas the drunkard mentioned that, but he mentions it in a sarcastic way. Oh, the saint of the village, he says. So we know that he uses that against her because he's sarcastic. But we also know her position in the community is so revered and strong that she is the person who's going to lead the procession. I'm raising the banner of Our Lady of Guadalupe or San Lorenzo, raising the banner of San Lorenzo to go down to the lake. We know that that day, that at sunset, that Josefa is going to lead the procession of all the young women to be ritually cleansed, all the young virgins to be ritually cleansed in the lake so that they can be announced, kind of like in a quinceañera way, announced as ready for marriage. And I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but what age might that have been? Who knows? Was it quinceañera 15? Was it 16, 17, maybe when they were 18? I don't know, but I would strongly suggest that it was probably no later than 18 in a rural community, in a rural Mexican-American community in the 60s and in the 70s and earlier, probably no more than 18. Not that there weren't some women that did not get married until 30 or later, of course, but normally that coming out announcement ready for marriage at a young age, which also tells us a little bit, since this is a year that Alicea is going to go down and purify herself for marriage, which might be another reason why Josefa is not particularly happy, even though she's proud that she's going to lead the procession. Does she want Alicea to go down there, ritually bathe, and proclaim herself as ready for marriage when we know that she's dating Eduardo? I don't know. You decide that for yourself. But that being honored by the community to lead the procession, because they talk about the honorific that it is, that honor to lead the procession to the lake says something about how she's viewed as by the community. So how is she going to be viewed by the community if we find out something about her? And you think, as I said earlier, you think you might know what it is we're leading to, and that's part of it. But there's something else. Why does Alicea want to go? We know that David, another person who Josefa rescued, the way she rescued Alicea from what could have been very bad circumstances, how she rescued David, and he lives with them. I don't think he lives in the house. I think he lives in the outbuilding, which is kind of like a bunkhouse. He doesn't really say. But she rescued David as well, so she cares about David. And he's a younger man, much younger, like 12 to 15. It doesn't really say his age, but he's younger. But so he's at that age where he is less of a, I don't even want to say threat, because I don't think that Joseph has threatened, but he's less of a, you're a man. That's what, let's say, put it that way. He's still a young boy. He's still a youth. So he's not a man. So that feeling that Josefa has about not wanting men in her house does not quite pertain to David yet. But something has happened to David. He's in the hospital. We find that out little by little as we're going through the play, that David's in the hospital. We don't know what happened to him. We find out later that something must have happened. We think that someone from the outside came and was there an attempt at robbery or something? Because we know that Josefa has money in the house, because we know that when Clemencia comes with the milk, that she gets paid from not a strong box, but a box that has the money from all the lace. We know earlier that the uncle comes looking for the box to try to find money to steal from them. So we know that there's money in the house. So the supposition in the play, we're led to believe that somehow David was injured by someone from the outside, perhaps trying to steal the money. But is that why Alicia just wants to leave this house where she's been safe and found refuge? Does she want to leave the house because David was injured and she's worried that Robert's going to come back and injure her? No, something a little deeper and odder. What is it? What do you think? If you know this already, write it down. I'm going to give you 15 seconds. If you don't know yet, write down what you think and why what happened to David. Take 15 seconds, and if you haven't read it yet, please write down what you think, just from our discussion so far, might have happened to David. What did you write down? What do you think happened to David that made Alicia perhaps want to leave this house? Well, we have an old theater trope. Someone comes in and allows for exposition to happen. And what is exposition? It's when you tell something that we don't see on the stage. It's explained. In ancient Greek theater, the messenger would come in and talk about the battle that happened over there and how many ships were sunk and who died. So it's something that happened off stage. In Shakespeare, it's the chorus usually coming in and saying, two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona where we lay our scene. So they talk about what happens. In contemporary plays, it's usually just someone coming in the show and talks about, did you hear what happened? Or they explain information we need to know to get to the next point in the play without it having to be shown. So what character have we not seen yet who appears? We've mentioned him, I think. The father, Father Parado. So we know he's Mexican, Mexicano, Latino, Hispanic. Father Parado appears. And he's saying about how wonderful it is. The people revere you so much. You're going to lead the procession. Everybody loves you. You're considered people look up to you so much, which is why you're given the honor of doing this. And the more he talks about how great a person she is, the more she starts to feel guilty and guilty and guilty. And we know she's a powerful woman. So in telling her how wonderful people think of her, she seems to start to lose her power. So what do you do with the priests if you're a Catholic and you feel bad about something? What do? Right. You confess. She says to the priest, Father, I need to confess something to you. She says it like that first. It's like, I just need to tell you something. Then literally, she seems to have an actual confession. And the father says, here? And she starts talking. And when she starts, she can't stop. And she confesses what happened. David, who got hurt, who's in the hospital. How did he get hurt? She loves David. She's taking care of him. She will continue to take care of him forever. But David appeared the previous night and saw something perhaps he wasn't meant to see. What did he see? I don't exactly know. But she says, David saw something happening between Josefa, not Eduardo, between Josefa and Alicea. And he was shocked and, for lack of a better word, freaked out a little bit, which of course, for lack of a better word, made Alicea freaked out. But who really freaked out? Josefa. Here's a big leap. Is it maybe an unbelievable leap? Because I'm not exactly sure how it happened, but somehow, what was she afraid of? What was Josefa afraid of? What would happen after David saw what he shouldn't have seen? But maybe, I don't even want to go there. Did Josefa mean for it to happen? Did Alicea mean for it to happen? Was it the first time it happened? I don't know. Or we don't know yet. But it was this big deal. Somehow, what was Josefa afraid of? What was David going to do? That he might tell people what he saw? And how would that change the way people felt about this woman they revered, about this Mexicana, Chicana? Let's call her Mexicana. I would say, my way of thinking, that maybe Josefa would not consider herself a Chicana, even though the writer Stella Portillo did consider herself a Chicana. This Mexicana, this Mexican woman, a bit old-fashioned, makes lace, strong woman, something in her snaps. How did it happen to be nearby? She grabs a knife and she has to somehow, I don't even think she's thinking. Something snaps and she stops David from being able to tell what happened. If you don't know yet what she did, read the play. Takes us back to the beginning. What's the first scene that we see, the first character that we see, and what are they doing? Alicea, on her hands and knees, in the very first scene that we see, scrubbing desperately, frantically at some stain on the floor, and then rinsing the rag and scrubbing, and her hair is in her face, and the sun is just coming up, so we realize she's probably been trying to clean this all night long, and she's frantic because how do we know it's dawn? Not only is the light starting to come up, but the milkman, the milk person, Clemencia, comes with the milk. We hear the rattling of the milk bottles, another trope, and she's kind of humming a song to herself. So we know the milkman always comes early in the morning, or they used to when they came to houses. And she tries to calm herself down, but even Clemencia says, Alicea, what's wrong? She says, nothing. And then Clemencia says, what's this bucket of, what's in it? This water looks kind of stained. Anyway, we know that somehow Alicea has been trying to clean the stain. You can guess, if you don't know yet, what the stain is on the floor that happened the previous night. the night that David saw Josefa and Alicia in something that perhaps all three of them hoped, shouldn't have, seen, done, put it in any way you want. But something happened that led to that. And whether it was the act of what happened or the act of what Josefa did, something happened that now Alicia wants to get out. That's what now we know something happened. And it's pretty clear that it's somewhere between the lines. So I'm not going to say exactly. You know. And if you don't know, read the darn play because it's an interesting play. And now that we know that because expositionally she confesses to the Father, and then the Father leaves because the procession is coming. And what happens towards the end? Now Josefa knows that the Father knows. And Tomas comes back and says, I know what you know, that you know, that I know. How do I know? Does he know about the last night? He really doesn't. What does he say? Exposition again, explaining what happened off stage. A year ago, the return of the swallows, the return of the roosters coming home. Tomas, Uncle Tomas, Tío Tomas says, last year, after the bathing of the young women, the virginal bathing, getting ready for, to proclaim that they were ready to be married. After that, and then they went off. I saw some figures getting out of the lake. I couldn't tell who it was. And then I thought I saw something, but I couldn't believe what I saw. And he doesn't go much further. He leaves it open, but he basically says, I saw what happened that night between somebody, and now I think it was you and Alicia. And does that have anything to do with David? So he puts it up and he says, now I want some money, and now we're going to have money regularly. So now he knows, we know that he's outrightly saying he's going to blackmail her. And if you know anything from literature, from movies, that once blackmail starts, it never ends. So he leaves thinking, yes, I got some money, clink, clink, money in my pockets, I'm going to go out and drink. He leaves. Josefa goes to the window, looks out, sees how beautiful it is, talks about the beauty, and then goes off. A bit later, the two altar boys, very small roles, two young boys, come in to pick up, they're altar boys. They come in to pick up the cassocks that she had been making with special lace for the procession that she had made. And they go, where, Doña Josefa, she's not there. So they go, let's go in and find it. So they go in and they find, go, wow, look at these. And then they go like, oh, what's that in the lake? Oh, I don't know. And then they just leave. And then what happens later? Who comes at the end of the play? What do they look out and what do they see on the lake? I'm not going to tell you. Read the play. But then think about how, what did we say the lake stood for? Symbolically? What was the theme? What was the motif? If the theme was love and its denial, hidden identity, the lack of power, the power of a woman and the loss of power of a woman, motif of the water and the motif of the lake, and the motif of the delicacy of a woman of lace that can be easily torn. the delicacy of the returning swallows and the returning things that the uncle had seen previously. And we know that the lake and the water stands for life, but it also stands for the opposite of life. But it ends with the view of the lake. You figure out, if you haven't yet, what those symbols, what the lake symbolizes, and that motif of the lake, and those themes in the play of The Day of the Swallows by Estela Portillo. And maybe now you can understand first why this play is such a big and I believe important link in the evolution of Chicano theater. The people immediately start writing plays with gay themes in it? Not for a while. And did women actually, when they started writing more plays, women were at the forefront. Chicanas were at the forefront of dealing more with gender issues and queerness, which we'll talk about in the next Chicano Theater 103G. But it's an important play because it opened up the possibility of lyrical, beautiful, magical language. It dealt with the possibility of Chicano theater if it's not overtly political, can the themes be social, and it lets you think about what you think the politics are, so that you can go, should that have happened or not have happened? Why does the play have to end that way instead of a happy ending? So it makes you think that way in what I think is a more interesting artistic way. Instead of telling you this has to happen this way, it asks you and to sometimes disagree with the play and say, why did this have to happen? I don't buy that. And that's an okay reaction because it's just making you think. But it's an important step in the evolution of Chicano theater that continues to the present. From the acto, short, quick, fast, funny, to longer actos that deal with from the farm workers' field to the school and equality of education, to Soldado Raso and Chicanos being pulled away from the fields to go work in Vietnam, to the mito of going back to our indigenous roots and a veneration for the earth, the land, the campesinos' work, and the mythology of the Nahuatl Aztec people and how that can empower us. It doesn't mean we have to walk around dressed like Indios or feathers, even though you can do that if you want, but it means can we draw strength from our indigenous roots to then docudrama and learning more about what has actually happened factually to Chicanos and how can we change that situation, to the history of Chicanos and immigration and expulsion, deportation in La Víctima, to Vietnam Campesino and Chicanos in a more global view of the world, to Manolo in a more realistic world in the barrio, and a well-made play, to this play, The Day of the Swallows by Estela Portillo, with lyricism, with poetry, with a well-made play with a beginning, a middle, and end, with characters that are a little more three-dimensional. Are there still some stereotypical moments? Yes. I would say none of these characters are stereotypical. I would even say they're not really archetypal. There is a drunken uncle, there is a priest, but I don't think they're really archetypal, in my opinion. Or maybe if you want to say they are a little bit, just those two. All the other characters are pretty well drawn. Realistic characters in realistic situations. Are they a little dramatic? Yes. Would you say that maybe it's a little over melodramatic? Could be. But do those things happen in real life? Do people, trigger warning, trigger content, do people sometimes suffer for their identity? Do people sometimes take their own lives because they have trouble dealing with their own identity? Still. So those are some of the things that, in my belief, Estela Portillo, not that other people might not have been thinking about him, not that other people weren't going to start to do that, but she, in 1970, 5 years after Luis Valdez and El Teatro Campesino premiered Las Dos Caras del Campesino. That door is open. People don't walk through it much until 1975 or so, when there was the first production and a few more then. It was known, as we said, she wrote this play to make money. Yeah, she did. She wrote this play for money. She says that. If you read the article, you would know that. And if you haven't, I hope you do, because it says a lot about her, both that she says out loud, because that's where, as I keep saying, she considers herself, calls herself a Chicana. It says a lot about her, and there's also stuff between the lines about her. So she says she made some money for a while. She was teaching high school, and then there was a grant, and she got this money to produce this television series, and she really loved it because it enabled her to be a little more creative, and she started writing more. And she was produced, this is in El Paso, where she was from, El Paso, Texas. She did these like cultural, like Latino cultural, kind of like PBS type things in El Paso in the late 60s, early 70s. And when the money ran out, they said, sorry, we can't go. So I think she did like 6 to 8 episodes, and then the money ran out. So after that, she was like, she says, I was the breadwinner in the family. Basically, she said between the lines. I needed to find money. So she found out, did a friend tell her? I think so. A friend told her, here's this, you should write, you should write a play. Here's like a place where you can like get some money. You can earn some money. So she said, oh, here's a contest. I can write a play and submit it to this play. And she said, I want to write a play that's going to make a lot of money. So she says, between the lines, kind of says it, but also between the lines, she says, I just wanted a play that would capture the people who give the awards, who give the money out, wanted to capture their attention and make them read this, something different. So she wrote this play about, in those days, a gay woman, a gay Chicana, big deal in those days, about a gay Chicana and what happens when her hidden identity might be coming to light, and how the community values would change from her being a venerated member of the community to something different. So that's what she writes this play about, and that's how she gets the award. However, she says in this interview, which is in the supplemental materials, I'll nag you again, please read it, and this very fascinating play. She says, but I'm not gay. I'm not a gay woman. I don't know anything about gay women. That might be true. My supposition, and I can say this because I don't feel like it's a negative to not be gay or a negative to be gay. It's just who you are. But I wonder why in 1973 or so, she had to make it such a big point that she was not gay. She was married. She had all daughters. I think it's 3 or 4, all daughters. And why she had to be very blunt about saying, I'm not gay. I don't know anything about gays, but I wrote this play, which is a very beautiful lyrical play. So I'm not saying she is or she isn't. I'm just saying it's a very interesting supposition. So that's the door that she kicked open, whether she was gay or not. A Chicana wrote this play, put out a well-made play, beginning, a middle, and ending, with lyrical language, where the main characters and the protagonist was a woman, was a Chicana, was a queer, gay Chicana. That's how Chicano theater continues to progress. I think it's a wonderful play. Is it somewhat dated? Perhaps you could say that. Are almost all of the plays that we discussed and read in this class dated? Perhaps you could say that. Some of them, I don't know if the situation is dated. Could you say that the writing is dated? You could, or you could say, no, that's the style of the writing. The actos are meant to be that way. You can not like them, but they're doing their job, which is a call to action. Basically, in Dos Caras el Patroncito, what's the direct action? What's a call to action? Boss bad, union good. So whether you like the styles or not, whether you like mitos or not, whether you like drama, a docudrama or not, it's a style. So you can say they're not well written. I'm not going to fight you, but it's the form and the function of the style. The important thing for me is, in Chicano theater, what's the purpose of the work? Why was it written? And how was it meant to be used? Why was this play written? Can you say, as she said, well, why was to make money? Okay. But I don't think that's enough. I think there's more. And that's where we get to. This is why this is a penultimate play that we're going to read. We have one more lecture. That lecture is going to be on how all of these different, from the acto to the mito to docudrama to the lyricism, archetypes, carpa, popular Mexican theater, Comedia dell'arte, San Francisco Mime Troupe, all of these things are part of the cauldron, the elements out of which now mostly writing alone, and he said it was the hardest thing to do, Luis Valdez, with help from El Teatro Campesino, but different from El Teatro Campesino, created the play Zoot Suit in 1979. This is the last thing I'm going to say about this to end this lecture. As you read this play, and read it, please, as you read the supporting supplementary and required material for this production, please read it. Think about the leap that they made from 1965, from actos, short comic skits being performed on the picket line or on the back of a flatbed truck, to a play that premieres at the Mark Taper Forum, which, if you don't know much about theater in Los Angeles, it's one of the premier professional theaters in the U.S. And after an incredibly successful run at the Mark Taper Forum, goes to Broadway. Whether that's important to you or not, it doesn't matter, because we're going to talk about that later. But in 14 years, Luis Valdez takes the play, Chicano theater premieres a play on Broadway. Think about that. I'll see you next week, or whenever the next time you turn on your module for our final lecture. Have a good day. Read the plays.